She's a TV host and best-selling author who's taken country cooking to an all-time high. But her life hasn't always been easy. Married right out of high school, orphaned by age 23, and trapped for many years inside her own home while she battled with agoraphobia. Eventually, she triumphed and became a restaurant and TV sensation. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on InnerVIEWS, our conversation with the queen of Southern cooking, Paula Deen. In your wildest dreams, could you have imagined this is the way your life would have turned out?
No, honey. Not in 1 trillion years. Never, never, never. My imagination is not that good to start with. No.
What did you think your life would hold? As a child growing up, what did you think you would be?
You know, it's funny, as a child growing up, I wanted to be a wife and mommy like my mother.
Yeah.
I guess that's a lot of Southern girls' ambitions, you know, from the 50s and 60s. You know, it didn't seem that important for the girls to get an education. I mean, it was a bonus, but you could certainly live without it. And there was, though, a while that in my senior year of high school that I really, really wanted to be a model.
A model?
Yes, I did a little modeling, and I loved being in beauty contests, pageants and all that stuff. So, yeah, but my daddy squelched that pretty quickly when I announced to him that I was going to Atlanta to Patricia Stevens Modeling School, and he said, over my dead body, will my daughter, unattended, go to that big city, Atlanta, Georgia, and get eaten up?
Was there ever a time before all of this that's happened to you now happened that you ever thought back and thought, I should have gone to Atlanta, I should have become that model?
No. You know, I really don't have any regrets. At the time I graduated, my mother and daddy had given me a gift for graduation, and it was a trip to New York City. Well, my daddy's baby brother was a model in New York City, and he worked a lot. He was on TV. He was like the Salem Man.
Yeah.
You know, it was before celebrities realized that there was a lot of money in commercials, and models were still doing this thing. Well, I went up there and spent 2 weeks with Uncle Bob, and I was so fascinated by it all. And he said, Paula Ann, if you'll stay, I'll help you get work. But I was in love. There was this boy waiting on me in Albany, Georgia, and that desire was bigger than the modeling.
So that boy back home, is that the one that became your first husband?
Yes, that was my first husband, the father of my children.
How was life for you as a married woman at those days?
Oh, it sucked. It really sucked. It sucked. I wasn't a very good wife.
Why?
Because I was so devastated over the premature death of my father and my mother. You know, it was a devastating time for us. And the trip that I took with agoraphobia at that time started kind of taking shape, and so it wasn't good.
For people who don't know your story, where were you in your relationship when your parents passed?
I was 19 years old when my daddy died, and he was just 40 years old.
Yeah.
And he was just the light of our life. He was this wonderful man that was never without a smile, always laughing. And anybody that ever met him just fell in love with him. And like I said, he was our anchor. And for him to die at 40 years old, it was unthinkable. It was just unthinkable. You know, my world had been perfect. And then all of a sudden at 19, what are we doing? Why are we having to deal with death, you know, at this early age? I don't want to deal with this. And so it was very, very hard because I was a daddy's girl. I mean, let's face it, there's something about a girl and her daddy. And to make the situation even worse, my mother, my best friend, this beautiful young woman, died of bone cancer at 44, just 4 years after my daddy.
Yeah.
And my world was truly rocked. Every bit of security I'd felt was gone. It was just gone.
Do you ever get over that?
You know, I don't know that you ever get over losing somebody that you love, but I think you do learn to deal with it, and you learn to accept that dying is part of living. And none of us are going to get out alive. We're all going to go there. Yeah. And I was just too immature at the time.
How soon after then your mother passing did the agoraphobia begin? And did it happen immediately, or is it something that gradually comes on?
Well, it's funny because it really started with the death of my daddy. I remember that first night my daddy died on a Friday morning. And that night when it was time to go to bed, naturally my husband and I was at my mother and daddy's. And when it was time to go to bed, I said, "Can I sleep in between you, Jimmy, and you, Mama?" We all three slept in that bed that night with me in the middle, scared to death. I was scared to death. And stinking thinking, bad thoughts started creeping in my head. I was raised Baptist. And Baptists are taught that everything happens for a reason. So I immediately started trying to figure out what the reason was. Why did my daddy have to die? So I came up with what I thought was a very reasonable answer that I shared with no one. But to make a long story short, at 19, I woke up every day waiting to die.
Really?
Yes. And that's just not a good way to live.
To play armchair psychiatrist here, is that why you play so much today, do you think?
I think so. I always liked to have a good time. Always. And I loved being in the center of everything. And just love life.
Yeah.
But yes, that's one of the reasons why today I don't take myself very seriously. You know, I really try to save it, Ernie, for the big things, like divorce and death and sickness and, you know, things that really, really count. But everyday life concerning Paula, no, I don't take it too seriously.
Take me back to the reason that you came up with. Why did you never tell anyone?
I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. And I felt like if I said the words, then it would immediately happen. You know, so as long as I didn't speak it, maybe, just maybe, it wouldn't happen.
When your mom passed away then, how do you handle that shock on top of the earlier shock? Yes, it had been a few years, but still.
It had been 4 years, but I was still very much in shock from my father's death. It was hard. It was very, very hard. And one of the hardest things about the whole thing was I had a 16-year-old brother that I had to try to finish with for my mother and daddy. It was like the last thing I could do for them. And not only that, I had 2 babies under 3 years old. and I had a husband that he and I disagreed on one big thing constantly every day in our life. So it was a lot for a 23-year-old.
Yeah.
When I see the 23-year-olds today, that are still going to graduate school, getting their masters, not even thinking about, the real life and what it can bring you out there. So it was a pretty good load for me to carry, and plus worrying about my impending death.
So then how did you start to realize that you were having a problem with the outside world? And also, how does that really start up within someone? You'd said first when your mom died, or your dad died, that you wanted to stay in bed. How does it build out? How do you realize what's going on?
Well, I realized at my daddy's death that I should have been in counseling. But because I didn't share all these thoughts with anybody, nobody knew to have me in counseling. I mean, they knew that I was heartbroken and that I was crying a lot and that I was very, very sad. But they didn't know, they were not privy to the thoughts going on in little Paula's head.
Yeah.
But I know, I'm very, very lucky in the fact that I know what triggered my agoraphobia. And agoraphobia, in my case, developed over the years.
And in what ways did it play out for you?
Well, it got pretty rough. I had lost my mother, lost my daddy, and my mother and daddy had not made their mark in life. They were still young. And so there was not a lot of money. But the little bit that they did leave me, I had given to my husband at the time to help him open a Chrysler dealership in Dawson, Georgia, which was right down the street, 16 miles outside of Albany. And took exactly 1 year to lose everything that we had. We opened it in 1977, lost everything, came back home in the back of a peanut wagon. A friend of my husband's was a peanut farmer there. His name was Billy. I'll never forget him. He was so sweet. And he came and offered to move us home using his peanut wagon. And of course, we had not one penny. We had no cars. All we had was each other and our sticks. Yeah. Our sticks being our furniture. But I remember in that ride, me getting in the back of that peanut wagon and wrapping my head up in a blanket so that I couldn't see I was not in my house. Because panic attacks were just terrible, when I would experience a panic attack. They were just awful because you knew that's truly that death was coming. When you have a panic attack, your heart will beat so hard and so fast that you're saying, there is no way that my heart can beat like this. It's going to have to stop. Your arms will go numb, and you just feel like everything's going out on you. And I learned how to breathe in a paper bag, a brown paper bag, to help regulate your breathing and to steady your heartbeat. So I never went anywhere without a brown paper bag in my purse.
Eventually you feel okay enough to get back into the world, and you get a job as a bank teller.
Yeah.
And then you're held up at gunpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like you couldn't write this stuff.
I know. I couldn't make it up, could I? No, for 20 years I rode the roller coaster that agoraphobia brings to one's life. But I have to say it hit its absolutely peak after we lost everything. So I knew there was reason that I should be insecure. That validated it. But oftentimes over those 20 years, I was what I considered a functioning agoraphobia. Sometimes I could function very, very well.
Yeah.
sometimes I couldn't function at all.
What did your kids think was going on during all of this?
You know, I never told my children, and I know that they knew something was wrong. One of my lowest points was the day that I had to tell my oldest son, Jamie, and he was probably 13 or 14, and I had to say, son, I'm sorry, but we're not going to be able to take guitar lessons anymore. I couldn't get him there. It was a mile down the road, and I couldn't get him there. And that hurt me so bad, because I feel like, you know, my children were shortchanged.
Yeah. Well, I think you've kind of made it up to him now.
Ernie, I have tried so hard to make it up to him.
Yeah.
I've tried so hard.
How did you finally build your way out of all of that?
Well, you know, it's funny. I was 40 years old, and my husband comes home one day and says, we're moving to Savannah. I said, what the hell did you say? He said, we're moving to Savannah. I've been offered a job. Well, I was devastated. I was devastated because I thought, Savannah, that's clear on the other side of the state. I'm not going to be able to get in my car and come home because I was too frightened. And how am I ever going to see what little bit of family I have left? Or all my friends, you know, that I had been so close to over the years. And we moved to Savannah. Like I said, 40 years old, being taken away from home. And it was a very sad time for me. Went to Savannah. We bought us a little house, and I went to bed.
For a
2
while.
months.
Yeah.
2 months. It was about 2 months. And I only got up for 2 reasons, and that was to eat and go to the bathroom.
What did your husband think was going on then?
Well, he knew I was nuts.
Is that what it was? Yeah.
I mean, he knew, because he was the one person that I had to share these thoughts with, because I had to have an enabler. I had to have somebody that would help me lie, to say, oh, we're busy tonight. We'd love to join you for dinner, but we have a prior engagement. You know, I had to have him to help me with this thing. And so he knew I was devastated. But
what finally ended the relationship?
Well, I felt our relationship, you know, getting weaker and weaker. And we disagreed on one thing that was a major, major problem as far as I was concerned for our family, and that was alcohol. And I fought like a tigress to change that, and I couldn't do it. And I begged him. I said, please, let's go get some help and let's address this problem while I still love you. And because I was so in love with that man. But you know, it just never happened. And I just decided that I had spent 27 years fussing and fighting for what I felt my children and I needed. And I was tired. I realized that I could not change anyone else. It's impossible. The only person I had control over was myself. I could change me. You know, and I remember, Ernie, when I was 18 years old, and my husband asked my father for my hand in marriage, and my parents were devastated. You know, they didn't want to see me get married at 18 years old. And I remember my mother coming into my bedroom when I was 18 and sitting down with me, and she had kind of a sad look in her eye. And she said, Paula Deen, as your mother, I have to tell you that if there's anything that you don't like about the person that you're planning on spending the rest of your life with, you do not have the ability to change them. And I look back and I think, how did my mother know that?
Yeah.
But of course, at the time, I felt like I knew much more than she did.
Right.
But you cannot change people. It has to be something that they want to do. And, you know, I didn't want to spend the next 27 years of my life, should I be fortunate enough to live that long, I didn't want to live it in turmoil and fighting every day for what I felt was right.
Yeah. At this
I
point,
wanted peace and contentment.
At this point, had you opened the first restaurant yet?
No.
So then all of this comes...
Well, kind of. I started the Bag Lady in 1989, and I was still married to my children's father. In fact, there were several things that he really helped me get started with this big business. He had a friend that owned a pool hall downtown Savannah, and he asked his friend if he would mind if I met with the health department. And what are they breaking in that kitchen in there, you reckon? He asked if he would be willing to let me meet with the health department in his pool hall so I could get a license.
Yeah.
And so he did a lot to help me. But I ran the Bag Lady out of our house for a year and a half. And then I went into a space in the Best Western that it was a turnkey operation. All I had to have was my first and last month's rent and be able to buy my groceries. It had all the pots, all the pans, forks, plates, everything.
And you had to guarantee them 3 meals a day.
I had to guarantee them 3 meals a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And we were still operating the Bag Lady.
Then that's the lady. The lady becomes the Lady and Sons.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, this evolves into the TV show and all of this stuff and all of that. And what I think is the
brother now, my
Uncle Bubba,
Uncle Bubba's Oyster House, a wonderful seafood restaurant that my brother and I have together.
The amazing thing about all of this to me is I'm sure there are a lot of people who suffer from agoraphobia, and a lot of them probably get over it, but none of them are pushed out as far as you are now. Does ever any of that come back to you? Are there ever moments where you have even a little anxiety? I mean, you're on planes, you're doing TV, you're doing all of this stuff.
You know, let me tell you, the thing that turned me around and turned my thinking around. As I told you, my husband had moved us to Savannah when I was 40, and I went to bed for 2 months. Well, one morning, I got up out of the bed, and I was standing in our bedroom, and for some reason, I don't know what reason, the Serenity Prayer ran through my head.
Really?
Yes. I'd heard it for years. But that particular morning, it went through my head and I understood it.
Yeah.
I understood what I was supposed to be asking God for.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be asking me to help change the things that I could change, accept the things that I couldn't, and the wisdom to know the difference between the two things. There was nothing I could do about my mother and daddy's death.
Yeah.
And I would sit around and I would fantasize that, well, maybe I was adopted and maybe my real parents. I'm a 40-year-old woman thinking this now.
Yeah.
So that morning, that moment, I accepted my mother and daddy's death. I said, you know, they're dead as hammers. It was just a bad streak of luck that both of my parents died early. But they are dead.
Do you wonder what the reaction would be to all of this today?
They would be so proud.
Yeah.
They would be so proud of their little Paula.
Okay, real quick before we run out of time. So yes, now you're out in public. We've established that through all that you've done, and you take your wedding and put it on TV too. Is there anything you still keep to yourself?
Not too much. You know what? If it's worth having and you can't share it, why do you want to have it?
Yeah.
You know, sharing is like the best part. And I so wanted to share my wedding, especially with the girls out there in America. You know, when you think it's hopeless, I'll never meet anybody. You know, it happened to me, and it can happen to you.
Okay, last question. What do you care more about, sharing or butter? Because you do love your butter.
Maybe butter. No, I'm
Thank you
kidding.
so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Ernie, thank you. Thank you for wanting to talk with me.
Paula Deen.
To order a DVD of this or any episode of InnerVIEWS, please visit HoustonPBS.org.